Hey everybody, this is John the Other, obviously. Now, as some of you might have noticed, the moral panic surrounding sexual assault and Me Too is becoming part of the normal background noise of life, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. This is so much the case that places like Huffington Post are running articles instructing men that following the excellent Mike Pence rule is not, I repeat, not the answer to the pervasive epidemic of sex assault complaints in the workplace. And hilariously, this is being framed as men punishing women for men's bad behavior. Quoting Genevieve Zing, who wrote in the Huffington Post, "Somehow, despite 1 in 3 women having been sexually harassed in the workplace, it is us," and she means women, "who have been identified as the risk. Treating women as a potential liability punishes us," that is, women, "for the transgressions of men, putting a professional handicap on those impacted rather than on those causing the problem," by which, of course, she means men. Now, for Genevieve Zing's commentary to not be absurd on its face, we must believe that all the claimed incidences of sexual misconduct characterized with the hashtag MeToo and now filling up the media are, all of them, actually sexual predators and sexual victims. We must believe that to take the Huffington Post's commentary as serious and honest. But this belief fails almost as soon as we consider it for a bunch of reasons. The first is that, aside from the outrageous sexual conduct such as what Harvey Weinstein is accused of, there is a lot of storytelling which details friendly kisses, pats on the butt, and low-intensity flirting. But in the post-Me Too world, there is no distinguishing between actual sexual victimization and friendly flirting. And this failure to distinguish is not just foolish, it's malicious. But having pointed that out, this is not the only reason the whining chorus of "don't use the Mike Pence rule" is absurd. And I don't mean just the significant fraction of accusations which are strictly false. There are also a great number of so-called accusations referring to incidents which supposedly occurred as much as 30 years ago. A victim, now in her late 50s, will claim she was subjected to sexual assault when she was a teenager, and for strange reasons, we do not tell an accuser that 3 decades ago is too long to realistically evaluate. But the difference between consensual sex and sexual assault, as we now define it, is really only the state of mind of the participant. So most sex assault cases depend almost entirely on testimony. But do you really think you can determine what happened when you have only testimony and it's an event that may or may not have happened 10 or 20 or maybe 30 years ago? Humans are terrible at retaining accurate memories, even of a week ago. And a person's memories are altered every time he or she recalls them. So 30 years ago, a person's memory is at best only vaguely similar to the actual events that it may be based on. This means that in a legal inquiry into a sexual event of 30 years ago, at best what we have is a guess. And a guess is not a sound basis on which to render a legal judgment of an alleged crime. And when any person with public esteem points this out, they are attacked, shamed, and attempted to be banished from polite society. Witness Matt Damon. So the current public complaining over the excellent Mike Pence rule is neither honest nor is it well-intended. There is now a pathological social movement growing which characterizes all male sexuality as predatory. And in response to this growing sickness, there's a large number of men who have never heard of MGTOW and are now taking steps to protect themselves from being figuratively lynched, and they are correct to do so. But returning to the issue of memory, the problem isn't just that nobody can actually remember the details of a 30-year-old hookup. There is an issue at the heart of a series of public policy and policing changes and legal innovations that are now ongoing within the legal systems of Canada, the United States, and the UK, and other Western nations. There is no such thing as a perfect victim. This rhetoric we hear trotted out each time a high-profile sex assault allegation begins to fall apart, when the story being told by an accuser begins to contradict itself, or when the known facts of a case show that the story elements in an accusation are actually impossible. We hear there's no such thing as a perfect victim. When an accuser claims she was raped and then it turns out she sent love letters to the supposed rapist after the event. When there turns out to be hundreds of text messages in which the supposed victim is clearly seeking sex from their assailant after the so-called sexual assault. We are told there's no such thing as a perfect victim. And indeed, we are now being regularly told by self-proclaimed experts that the science of behavior analysis, which is reliable in other areas of criminal investigation, runs by the rules of backwards world when it comes to matters relating to women and sex. Inconsistencies and contradictions in a person's story are usually an indication to observers that the story containing these inconsistencies is either untrue or it's being misremembered. In other words, the story is false. If I say the dog ate my homework, you know that dogs typically don't eat 3-ring binders, and they don't delete Word documents, and they typically can't use computers. So if I tell you the dog ate my homework, you can probably figure out my story is a bunch of hooey. And obviously don't punish the dog. But when we enter the realm of accusations of sexual assault, we are being subjected to a narrative that inconsistencies in the stories are signs of the story's truth. Now, this is a relatively new line of rhetoric, popularized in mainstream with only the last few years. And it's new enough that when we consider it dispassionately and calmly, it's clear to us that it is a bit of flim-flam we are being fed. And as an intelligent member of the public, you might be reluctant to accept that the normal indicators of falsehood should now be read as indicators of truth. So, this rhetoric is being presented along with novel and brand new scientific theories, and once wrapped in these scientific theories, what we would normally not be able to make sense of appears to be factual. There's a lot of junk science being peddled now, and it's being used as justification for policy changes that we would not accept without scientific buzzwords such as neuroscience tells us. One of the recent examples of this is a claim that in moments of duress, such as during an assault, stress hormones shut down the prefrontal cortex, which has the claimed effect that a victim's memories of an assault will be non-rational, emotion, and body-based. It is further asserted by so-called experts that a victim's account of their alleged rape, being fragmentary and rationally incoherent, should be treated by the police as a sign that the story is truthful. And most people, when this claim is wrapped up in scientific-sounding explanation, will believe it. In particular, the police will believe it because, just like us, the police are being endlessly bombarded through the media with rhetoric claiming we are in a sex assault-enabling culture. In fact, the police are subjected to ongoing training from the same people that you and I see producing public service announcements claiming we are all a bunch of rape enthusiasts. The reality is that most people want to prevent sex assault from happening. Nobody wants rape to be enabled. Nobody wants actual rapists to get away with committing their crimes. So we are now seeing policing and prosecution policies being implemented which will jail a much higher percentage of the people accused with no regard for their factual innocence, because the policies are based on a belief that false accusations either don't exist or are so rare as to be of no significance. People like Lucy Ducotear and Mandy Gray are still talked about in the mainstream as survivors or victims and not simply described as accusers, or more correctly, false accusers. In the climate of all this victim rhetoric, police officers, who are mostly good guys, are trying as hard as they can to do the right thing, even while they are being excoriated by victims advocates. Good guys, of course, are naturally attracted to something that seems to put more bad guys in jail, but in the present climate, they are increasingly disallowed by their policies and their training from using procedures which would separate false accusations from actual offenders. There is, however, a minor problem with the new neuroscience-based trauma-informed procedures now being implemented by your city's police force. The, quote, science telling us things like stress chemicals shut down the prefrontal cortex and telling us that memory in a high-stress situation is body-based rather than detailed and coherent is not true, and it's not science. For example, witness accounts of events like the Sandy Hook shooting and the Las Vegas mass shooting have given detailed, linear, and consistent accounts of their experiences, somewhat in contradiction to this new theory that under a high stress, your memories become fragmentary and incoherent. And the advocates explaining how neuroscience informs these better policing policies that will put more criminals behind bars are not neuroscientists. But before we jump on them and call them all, scumbags and hustlers out to jail the innocent and make a buck, we need to realize they believe what they are selling because, like most people, they want to stop rapes from happening and they want to see sexual predators jailed. And if you live in a worldview in which you think sex assault claimants cannot be wrong and cannot lie, or if you work in law enforcement in a climate of constant blame that you're not jailing enough of the perpetrators of a mostly imaginary crime epidemic, then it's natural to grasp after whatever might give aid to those apparently tragic victims. And this is a key factor to understand why flim-flam and pseudoscience is coming to dominate policing and prosecution of sex offenses. Most of the people pushing the bad science behind these incoherent policing and legal policies are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to stop an apparent crime wave. So the phrase, "the neuroscience tells us," is probably something you're going to hear a lot more of in the next year. And when you hear it, it's going to be coming from people who really think they're doing the right thing. But it's also a phrase alerting you that whatever gets said right after "the neuroscience tells us" is a load of nonsense and non-science.
So, I don't expect very many people are going to watch this because, of course, it's Christmas, and obviously Merry Christmas, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, then Happy Festivus, or whatever other events you might be celebrating. Friendsmas, perhaps. Anyway, having said that, I hope everyone's stuffed full of whatever kind of food they like, and thanks for listening, and as always, have a lovely, lovely day.